afternoon. I'm Jonathan First, I'm Managing Director of Delphos International. My background is very much dominated by what I call climate finance and impact investing, something I've been involved in for the past almost 7 years. First started to recognize the importance of it when I was at the Development Bank of Southern Africa. I was very fortunate to be able to use my understanding and my background in impact investing and climate finance to lead the development of the DBSA's Green Bank, which was effectively a climate finance facility, which was co-funded by the DBSA, Green Climate Fund, and EIB. Since then, I've continued to focus on impact investing and climate finance, primarily through my involvement with Climate Policy Initiative, which runs something called the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance. I'm also chair of the Green Outcomes Fund, which is Africa's first outcomes-based fund, and I was involved in setting up the Impact in Investing Advisory Board for South Africa and was a board member. So I joined Delphos full-time towards the end of last year. My particular focus is on capital raising. Delphos International has two arms to it. It has financial advisory and capital raising. I focus much more on the capital raising side, given my background in investment banking and development finance. My particular focus is on South Africa, Southern Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. I have been involved in capital raising in other global areas such as Central Asia. But as I said, my primary focus is Africa. The focus of the firm is, however, the global emerging markets. As I said, focused on transaction advisory and on capital raising. So we have secured a number of mandates. The firm itself, there's 120 people, have a wide-ranging mandates that they have secured in many of the global emerging markets. As far as our specific focus is concerned, that is, once again, Sub-Saharan Africa, we have a number of mandates that have been very exciting. The biggest focus or the biggest opportunity at the moment is around renewable energy. We're currently working on a catalytic empowerment fund, which we believe will go a long way to securing funding, or catalyzing, should I say, funding for private sector, what I call utility scale renewable energy projects. So in addition to that, we are working on specific mandates around renewable energy. We're also busy engaging with a company around the treatment of water, which clearly is an enormous challenge in South Africa. And then there's a number of potential opportunities in the green hydrogen space, all of which, of course, make a significant difference not only to preventing climate change, but job creation. And in other words, all the criteria that we refer to as ESG impact. To me, the biggest challenge is what I call politics, government, and regulation. I think that it is becoming extremely difficult, particularly for the private sector, to develop projects, to fund projects with the current regulatory environment. Clearly this does differ from country to country. But in my view, my personal view, governments are not helping the process. This is a complicated topic. It's obviously one which we can discuss for many hours, but I think that government reform, government support is vitally important. I think we have to accept that governments do not have funding or the availability of funding, particularly in the developing world, and particularly in Africa. But I think that if they could support private sector funding and private sector initiatives through political support, regulatory reform, I think that would greatly assist the development of, let's say, impact-related infrastructure. I suppose, excitement is maybe not the right word. I think it's more necessity. I think that climate and preventing climate change is clearly at the top of everyone's agenda. And the reason why I think that this, leads to excitement, as we can refer to it, is that a lot of money, a lot of funding is now being made available to support the prevention of climate change. And I think also in terms of just preventing climate change through the infrastructure projects, through the businesses that are developed, clearly there are other benefits. So these are so-called social benefits, such as job creation, jobs for women, development of local communities. So I think it's the fact that we need to change. We need to recognize that the climate is extremely important in the future, not only of Africa, but obviously the planet. And I think that funders understand this. And I think the ability to catalyze funding leads to the benefits that I previously spoke about, namely, as I said, preventing climate change, job creation, community development. The three countries in my mind that are perhaps ahead of the others are Rwanda. Rwanda clearly has a climate agenda. It's probably the most developed climate commitment on the continent. So certainly, when you visit Rwanda, you can feel the difference. You can feel there's change. You can feel the commitment to, for example, meeting climate targets within the country. The other country, of course, is Kenya. Kenya has a vast population, almost similar to South Africa. Clearly doesn't have the economic wealth of South Africa, but I just feel that the country is trying to change, that the government is trying to support change, and in particular around climate. Given the resources relative to South Africa, for example, in my mind, they're doing a better job. And then the last country is Namibia, and in particular around green hydrogen. I think they've stolen a march on the continent. I think they've stolen a march on South Africa. And clearly, once again, the government, the institutions within the government have recognized the importance of green hydrogen, have recognized the country as a launching pad for green hydrogen. So those are really the three countries that I believe are making a lot of progress. I don't know West Africa particularly well, nor do I have much knowledge on North Africa. But clearly, as I said, those three countries seem to be stealing a march on the others. I think the inaugural conference was successful. I think one of the reasons it was successful is that it very much tied in with the Formula E that was held in Cape Town at the same time. And I think, well done to the organizers for recognizing that, because I think it was a very good springboard to the conference, to the success of the conference. I think the other thing that was important, it was a fairly small conference, and as a result of which I think the interaction between delegates was better. And I think, certainly people left the conference with a positive view, given that there are any number of conferences that are held in Cape Town and held on the continent during the course of the year. So I definitely think it created a buzz, it created interest, and I think there was certainly most of the delegates, as I can say, would be very keen and look forward to the next conference. So carbon finance, carbon credits, voluntary carbon markets. It is become probably one of the hot topics at the moment, because what is recognized is that it represents a source of funding, a real source of funding, which can make projects happen. So that's on the sort of positive side. So I think carbon finance is here to stay. I think the issue or the challenge is that it's very much in its infant stages. And I think there's a far greater expectation at this stage than the reality of securing carbon finance. So I think we need to manage expectation. I think we need to understand the markets a lot better. But I also think, very importantly, we have to contextualize the markets within a national or a regional context. So I think that's the big challenge. But as I said, I certainly think it's one of the main sources of finance for the future. So the upcoming event, I think the importance of it is once again to create an atmosphere, to create a platform, to create a meeting place for people to engage. And I think engage in a number of ways. First of all, to bring funders together, but funders across the funding spectrum. But I also think it also needs to bring together people who need funding. And I think it also has to do it within the context of Africa, and of course the challenges and the advantages of funding projects in Africa. And I always think the most successful conferences is, first of all, to introduce new themes, new concepts, or to go into a lot more detail on current themes and current concepts, such as, for example, carbon finance. But more importantly, for people to engage, for people to make contacts. I always believe that conference is not where necessarily you do the deal, but what allows you to do is to get the introduction, and then to hopefully have follow-up meetings when the real business is done. So yeah, I definitely think it's a feature. It should become a feature of not only being held in Cape Town, but I think also a feature on what it tries to achieve. I think in closing, I think that the summit or the conference is going to remain relevant as long as it continues to choose topics to discuss that are relevant and that get people to think and engage. So, you're only as good as, I think, as your last conference, your last summit. But certainly based on the last one, or should I say the first one, certainly there is expectation that the second one should be just as good, if not better. But I think the organizers, and certainly I'm part of the advisory committee that's supporting the organizers, I think that we're developing topics to discuss, which I think will keep interest in the summit and keep the interest of the people attending the summit.